Last summer, on a bayou just outside Houma, Louisiana, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew about fishing bait. A 68-year-old man caught 19 catfish in under 3 hours using something that cost him less than 50 cents at the grocery store, and that something was sitting in his kitchen cabinet the entire time. Meanwhile, the guy in the next spot with a $400 tackle box pulled in exactly 2 undersized fish the whole afternoon and went home mad. What I am about to show you today will change the way you fish forever, and I guarantee you the tackle industry does not want this video to exist. Welcome to American Fishing, the channel where we rescue the knowledge that the fishing industry wanted buried. If you are new here, subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss a single secret we uncover. Now let me tell you about a man named Earl Dawson. Earl is 68 years old and has been fishing the Louisiana bayous since he was a barefoot boy running through the marshes with a cane pole. His grandfather was a commercial fisherman back in the 1940s, and he kept a leather-bound journal with every technique he ever learned. When Earl's grandfather passed away in the winter of 1981, Earl inherited that worn journal along with a rusty old tackle box. Most of the journal pages were water-stained and barely readable by then, but one single page near the back was circled 3 times in red pencil. The entry was dated the 23rd of June, 1947, and it described something so ridiculously simple that Earl almost ignored it. His grandfather had written that the best bait enhancer he had ever found was not something he bought at any store or ordered from a fancy catalog. It was plain coarse rock salt straight from the kitchen pantry, the same kind of rock salt that you use for brining a Thanksgiving turkey. Earl tried it the very next weekend out on Bayou Lafourche and was stunned. The catfish came in waves like something invisible was pulling them closer, and that is exactly what was happening beneath the surface of that dark water. Researchers at Louisiana State University published a detailed study on how dissolved mineral compounds directly affect freshwater fish behavior. What they discovered is that when coarse rock salt dissolves in water, it creates a measurable gradient of sodium and chloride ions in the current that fish can detect through their lateral line sensory system, from distances exceeding 60 feet away in calm, still water conditions. The lateral line is essentially an invisible chemical radar system that runs along the entire length of every freshwater fish body. It picks up microscopic chemical changes in the surrounding water column that no human sense could ever hope to detect without laboratory equipment. And rock salt triggers that sensory system more powerfully than almost anything. Now, this salt technique is just one of 15 forgotten methods that Earl found carefully documented inside his grandfather's old journal. 15 methods that the modern tackle industry has deliberately buried. I spent months compiling every single one into a guide called The Angler's Vault. Inside, you will find a complete arsenal of forgotten homemade bait formulas, old-school water reading techniques that GPS and sonar simply cannot replicate, and the prohibited methods that bayou fishermen perfected over generations. Everything is waiting for you in the first link in the description below, but stay right here with me, because there is one critical detail coming up that determines whether the salt method works brilliantly or backfires on you. Now think about what happens every single time you walk into Bass Pro Shops. You see entire walls completely covered with liquid attractants and scent sprays, rows and rows of synthetic formulas in fancy bottles promising miracles. Each one costs somewhere between $12 and $20 and lasts maybe 4 trips. And every single year, they release a brand new and supposedly improved version that is designed to make last year's formula feel completely obsolete overnight. That is not innovation, and that is not progress. That is planned obsolescence. They engineer these products to run out fast, so you come back and buy more. Meanwhile, a 1-pound bag of coarse rock salt costs $1.29 at Walmart, and that single bag lasts more than 20 serious fishing trips easily. Cabela's alone sells over 90 different fish attractant products in their catalog. Bass Pro Shops dedicates an entire department to what they call scent technology. And not a single employee in any of those stores will ever volunteer the truth that a simple handful of rock salt accomplishes what their top shelf product does. Because the fish swimming below does not care about the brand printed on the label. Its lateral line system detects sodium ions and chloride ions and nothing else. It does not matter if those ions came from a $20 designer bottle or from a 2-pound bag of salt that has been sitting in your kitchen for months. What truly matters is the concentration level and how you deliver it to the water. And that exact technique is what I'm going to teach you step by step right now. Because old Earl did not just dump a handful of salt into the water randomly. He followed a precise method that his grandfather had perfected over 40 years. If you use too much salt, you create an osmotic shock that repels every fish nearby. If you use too little, the gradient is simply not strong enough to be detected at all. The entire secret lies in the balance, and that balance is coming up next. Stay with me, because the next part is where the real magic finally happens. Now I am going to teach you Earl's complete method broken down by species, because the salt technique does not work the same on every fish. Different species react in very different ways. Each species has different sensitivity levels in their lateral line. And understanding those differences is what separates a good day from a truly great one out on the water. Let us start with catfish because they are the king of salt response. Channel catfish have the most advanced chemoreceptor system in freshwater. They can detect dissolved minerals at concentrations so low it borders on the absurd. When you add rock salt to your bait, catfish respond within 2 to 4 minutes. Earl's method for catfish was to take 1 level tablespoon of coarse rock salt and crush the crystals halfway using the bottom of a heavy glass jar. You do not want powder and you do not want whole crystals either. You want cracked irregular pieces that dissolve at 2 different speeds. The smaller fragments dissolve fast and create an immediate scent trail. The larger chunks dissolve slowly and keep the fish circling the area longer. Earl called this the 2-wave system because it hits the fish twice. Mix that crushed salt into a ball of dough bait the size of a tennis ball. Work it in with your fingers until the salt is evenly distributed throughout. That is your catfish formula, and it has worked on Louisiana bayous for decades. Now let us talk about crappie because they respond differently to salt. Crappie are more cautious feeders and they approach dissolved minerals slowly. The trick with crappie is to use about half the amount of salt you use for catfish. Half a tablespoon per tennis ball-sized portion of bait is the sweet spot. And with crappie, you want the salt crushed much finer than the catfish version, almost like a coarse powder so it dissolves in a steady, even stream underwater. Crappie do not respond to the sudden burst the way catfish do. They prefer a gentle, consistent gradient that draws them in over 8 to 10 minutes. Earl noted in his grandfather's journal that crappie fishing with salt requires patience but delivers consistent results once they arrive. Bluegill is another species that responds beautifully to the salt method. Bluegill are aggressive little feeders and they hit salt-enhanced bait hard. Use the same amount as catfish, but add a tiny pinch of garlic powder to the mix. The combination of sodium ions and allicin from garlic creates a double signal. Bluegill find that combination absolutely irresistible in warm, shallow water. Earl caught more bluegill than any other species using this exact combination. Now, here is something important, and I need to be completely honest with you. Largemouth bass do not respond to dissolved salt the way other species do. Bass are primarily visual predators that hunt by movement and vibration. Dissolved minerals in the water do not trigger their primary hunting instincts. You might get occasional interest, but it is not reliable or consistent enough. If you are targeting largemouth bass, this technique is not your best option. And I am telling you that because the industry never tells you what does not work. They want you buying everything for every species without knowing the difference. Now let me share one more secret that Earl guarded for most of his life. Water temperature completely changes how effective the salt method performs. In the early morning, when the water is cool, the salt dissolves much more slowly. This is actually ideal because the trail lasts longer and reaches farther out. Between 5 and 7 in the morning is the absolute golden window for salt bait. The cool water keeps those ions releasing gradually for up to 20 minutes. In the midday heat, the warm water dissolves salt almost instantly. The concentration spikes and crashes so fast the fish barely have time to respond. If you must fish in the heat, Earl's trick was to use the largest crystals possible. Those big chunky pieces of rock salt resist the warm water much longer. Storage is another detail that most people get completely wrong with salt bait. Well, you never premix your salt into the bait the night before a fishing trip. The salt keeps reacting with the moisture in the dough even outside of water. By morning, your bait is a soggy, salty mess that fish will reject on contact. Earl always carried his salt in a separate sealed bag in his vest pocket. He mixed it fresh right there on the bank moments before casting his line. That way the bait is perfect, and the salt is at full strength every single time. Now stop and think about what you have learned in this video today. A 50-cent ingredient that outperforms products costing $20. A precise method broken down by species so you know exactly what works. And a technique that Louisiana bayou fishermen perfected over 3 generations. The most powerful fishing knowledge does not come in a fancy package on a shelf. It comes from people like Earl Dawson and his grandfather's water-stained journal. The industry thrives on your ignorance because the moment you learn, you stop spending on things you never needed in the first place. And if you want to go even deeper into this kind of forgotten knowledge, the Angler's Vault contains the complete seasonal calendar for natural baits, the old knot techniques that hold 3 times stronger than modern rigs, and every method from Earl's journal organized by species and water type. It is all waiting for you in the first link in the description right now. Every subscription to this channel keeps alive what the industry wants forgotten. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with a friend who spends way too much money on bait every season. Because a $1.29 bag of rock salt catches more fish than a full tackle box, Earl's grandfather knew it in 1947, and now you know it too.